So now we're going to talk gastropods. Gastropods literally means gastro is stomach, like you guys already know gastrodermis, for example, and pod is foot. So their name means stomach foot, which is like, that's a dumb name. What are you talking about? And basically the foot, which is, the mobile organ, the organ that moves them, comes right out of their visceral hump, right out of their stomach. And, there's few animals that have a visceral hump that is as visual and easy to identify as a snail, right? The snail's got the visceral hump right on top of his back with the shell. All the digestive, reproductive, respiratory organs are all tucked up in that shell. And he's got a very obvious visceral hump. The only thing that comes out of that visceral hump is his foot. Crawls along the ground, little eyes come out on the tentacles, life goes on. I wish that sneeze would have come out, I tell you. All right, anyways, let's see. The snail, here's what you should know about him. Pen, that'd be nice. Okay, the snail has a foot. The foot of that snail is this right here, okay? The visceral hump on this guy is this guy inside that shell right there. And that's going to hold his stomach, but you'll see in the diagram where we cut him in half, it holds a great many more things than just a stomach. Snails, if you've seen snails or slugs, which I wouldn't be surprised if you hadn't necessarily, because western South Dakota is a relatively dry place, and there are a lot of dry habitats where snails and slugs are not going to enjoy that. Snails and slugs are in a more damp area, so you're talking about places like under your deck, rocks by a river, really damp, densely vegetative areas. There are places like that in western South Dakota, but if you don't see them cruising down the sidewalk, because they like a really damp, cool area. The snails and the slugs will both lay down a layer of slime that they then crawl on the slime. And some snails and slugs will actually crawl in the slime layers laid down by other slugs because it eases resistance and saves them a lot of energy. And then basically their little foot kind of has rhythmic contractions that pushes them along that layer of slime. They can move at a very, 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 very slow 10 feet per hour at their maximum speed, which is ridiculously slow. Pardon me. I don't know what crazy person set up this test. He must have had something wrong with him, but we did learn that slugs and snails, their layer of slime is so good at protecting them from sharp things in their environment that they can actually crawl over the top of upright razor blades without being cut. And like I said, there's probably something wrong with the guy who designed that test. But sure enough, they can do it, which is pretty cool. Hello, Avery. Nice to see you, sir. All right. A snail is a univalve. So last time we talked about bivalves. We're talking scallops, clams, and those things had two shells. Two shells on a hinge. They open the hinge, close the hinge, two shells. These guys are a univalve. One shell. Cool? Two shells on a clam, one shell on a snail. Kind of makes sense, right? Their shell has a very cool trapdoor feature. When they are, frightened or whatever, they will pull their entire body up into the shell and close this bony plate. And for a predator, that is incredibly hard to access, that bony plate. When the snail wants to know if the world is safe, he can open that bony plate just a tiny bit, and because his eyes are on the end of tentacles, he can actually stick those tentacles out just a little bit from that bony plate and see if his area is safe. Then open the door a little more and push his head and his foot out of his single shell to move more safely. So that's a pretty cool design for those guys. So that's a snail. All right. What do you need to know about snails? We'll go through all their systems, just like everything. Digestive system and nutrition. These guys are primarily eating plants. There are a couple of slugs and snails in the ocean that are eating little tiny fish and stuff, but for the most part, we're talking about plants. Small plants, generally speaking. They have a radula. They are kind of the poster child for a radula. Hello, Sam. Thanks for tuning in. Circular mouth with many small teeth that they kind of grind and chew up little bitty parts of leaves and decaying material and that kind of stuff. And so that's a snail. Slugs are going to have the same systems for digestion, nutrition, reproduction, and respiration. The only difference is they don't have a shell. If it's in the ocean, it's going to have gills, kind of a no-duh. If it's on the land, it's going to have lungs. Food is broken down in their digestive system, just like with any other organism. Waste is expelled via the anus, just like with a lot of the organisms we've talked about. The inconvenient thing with snails is the location of their anus, which you'll see in a diagram is not, it's not the best, you know, location in my humble opinion, but you know, I didn't make them, so I try not to dog on them. The mantle cavity, they do have a mantle cavity, space between the mantle and the body. And basically that's where their lungs are. There's lots of respiration there. And then they have eyes at the end of tentacles that go to a true brain. It's much more developed than the simple ganglia you've seen before in flatworms. We can say it's got a pretty decent brain, a snail or a slug. So really for major body systems, there's not a huge difference. Like compared to earthworms that we just saw, right? Take out the crop, take out the gizzard, you got basically the same thing, right? It's so a lot of these systems are going to overlap, and so that's why it's such a valuable thing to kind of compare these body plans. So this is a really cool diagram. It's not going to be on your test. I think we got enough diagrams for the test with the clam and the earthworm and hydra, but this is a cool diagram. So here we've got kind of all his body systems working together. We have the mouth right here, really small, with a radula to grind up his plant material, dropping down into a crop, which is basically like our stomach, just a bag that holds the food. From the crop, it's going to run up to a larger bag, his stomach. The food gets up here into his stomach, then an intestine. Food runs through the intestine where it's digested and absorbed. And this, I think, is maybe not the most convenient thing in the whole wide world. It comes out on his mantle cavity, which is gross. I mean, that's like where your lungs are. That's a downright terrible place to get rid of waste. But sure enough, that's where it comes out. So a little, I don't know. I think that maybe that's kind of gross, but okay. So the food's going to go out the mantle cavity, right above his lungs, right down the poor guy's neck. I feel bad for him just looking at it, but that's the way the good Lord made him. So I guess, what do? They have a gill or lungs. It's going to depend on where you see them. But they're going to have a respiratory, you know, organ that's very close to the heart, just like a lot of the organisms we've seen. We talked about fish and how their heart's so close to the gills, and humans, how our heart's so close to our lungs. Very comparable designs there. They have digestive glands next to their small intestine. We haven't seen a lot of digestive glands yet. Earthworm didn't have much to speak of in the way of digestive glands, but just for, you know, an analogy's sake, your small intestine has a pancreas right at the beginning of the small intestine. Also has a gallbladder right at the beginning of the small intestine. And that's going to get digestive enzymes to your food right off of the gate, you know, right out of the stomach. So they have all this time to digest. Snails have a similar approach. A lot of critters do. We still have a brain up here. We still have a nerve cord that loops around through all of his internal organs. We have a foot, which is much more pronounced than what we've seen in the other animals we've talked about. And then a gonad with some sort of duct that leads to the outside world. Not unlike worms, not unlike you and me. Okay, so it's, you know, pretty similar body systems, but just kind of a cool view to see them, you know, in half that way. So just as far as major body plans, there's your sense in the environment, respond to stimulus, reproduction, nutrition, digestion. What am I missing? I don't know. Movement, support, the shell. That's all from like your first slide of the chapter, right? Okay, so Pacific sea snail. Probably a video I'll throw on Edmodo as opposed to taking the time out of lecture to cover it, because I'm afraid I don't want to move the test back because people get that schedule on Sunday. I do want to stick to that. But basically, Pacific sea snails have a very, very weird body plan. They're just like any other snail, but they have a like harpoon-like bone that shoots out of them and stabs incredibly complicated neurotoxins into small fishes. The fish is paralyzed, and the snail will slowly eat the whole fish. It's crazy. And you got the slowest critter in the whole wide ocean eating the fastest. You know, it's ridiculous, but it's cool. And you know, sometimes people will step on them. Pardon me. Sometimes people will step on them, and the Pacific sea snail will stab them with that little harpoon, and they get this super complicated neurotoxin, and the odds of survival are not particularly shiny. So odds of that are pretty rare, but just another reason I'm afraid of the ocean and everything in it. Other gastropods. Slugs, we've already talked about slugs. You've probably seen these guys in South Dakota. You know, they live in damp places just like a snail, still have a visceral hump, very comparable body plans. The only difference is they don't have a shell. Now, one that I have not seen is a nudibranch. A nudibranch is a very, very colorful, I don't know why they're so colorful, very, very colorful marine sea slug. Okay, so we're talking about saltwater environments. They're still eating plants, same body system, same respiration, digestion, reproduction. The only difference is, for whatever reason, they are super, super, super cool looking. And that's a nudibranch. You do not have to spell that correctly on your test. I'm just trying to show you some of the crazy stuff that fits in these major, orders of living animals. So it's kind of a cool animal. All right. So now the tough one, mollusks. Okay, mollusks are. Oh, sorry, my Zoom thing is on top of this word, but I'm pretty certain they're cephalopods because that means the head that is a foot, and I'm certain that's what they are. So, cephalopods are your octopus and your squid. Most of us are reasonably familiar with octopus and squid. Thanks to Finding Dory, right? We all know that like octopus have 3 hearts, whatever. Everybody knows that. Maybe you guys might be too old for that movie. I don't know. Anyways, here's the deal. Octopus have 8 arms. Squid have 10. 2 real long ones and 8 short ones. And these guys are called the head-footed order because their foot, which is their big mobile organ, that's this guy, okay, is on top of their head. That's this guy. It's a very weird design, but it works great. Generally speaking, they got fins that they use to kind of steer and drive themselves. This guy here is a squid. You can tell because he's got 10 arms and he's got this kind of arrowhead shaped tail that, well, I can't really call it a tail. It's not his tail. It's his foot. Okay. But his foot's got this arrowhead shape that he kind of paddles as he goes through the water. And so that's squid, octopus, and cuttlefish. Pardon me. Difference here, not going to have a radula. They're going to have a beak. And so it looks very similar to a bird's beak. So whatever they're catching, clams and things like that, they'll bring in, they'll crush it with the beak, and they'll eat that way. Their foot, part of it is differentiated into tentacles. Most people are familiar with octopus tentacles specifically because they have those suckers that everybody's kind of, used to seeing and that kind of stuff. So that's kind of cool. Sucker-bearing arms catch food. They also help them move, grip the seafloor. Many different types of octopus, squid, cuttlefish can change colors to blend into their environment. Some of them can change the shape of their body, so they can turn their soft, squishy body into like pokey, rigid spines and look like coral. I don't claim to understand the first thing about these critters. They are so ridiculously complicated. This guy right here is a cuttlefish, not because he's particularly cuddly, but because of a bone in him called the cuttle bone. And he's just weird. They'll take like stinging arms off of other jellyfish and they'll carry them around as weapons. They're freak me out how smart they are. They're weird, super weird, and they're just crazy. But that's a little bit about a cuttlefish. You get male cuttlefish. I don't expect you to read all this. Basically, they want the best den in the area during mating season, and so the animals will threaten each other. A larger male cuttlefish will basically have many females, and then he guards the female until they lay eggs. But a larger competitor can chase him off. If the competitor doesn't run away, he'll attack it, and the cuttlefish can paralyze the other first. Which is crazy. And this is a crazy one right here. Small cuttlefish have a chance of finding a mate next year when they're bigger, but if they can't win, the most successful methods are camouflage. Small cuttlefish will use camouflage abilities to disguise themselves as a female. They'll change their body color, conceal their extra arms because males have more arms than females, and pretend to hold an egg sac. Then they'll swim past the guard and mate with the females in the den because they look like a girl. So cuttlefish are weird. Let's just say that. Cuttlefish are crazy. They can change color on command. I don't know, man. Those things are crazy, crazy, crazy. But, hey, what's going on, buddy? That's my 3-year-old. He's in here. Anyways, sorry, he's okay. Hey, Eden, take him on out of here. Have him play outside or in the living room. Sorry. All right, anyways. So now we talk about echinoderms. How are we doing on time? Yeah, we're doing okay. All right, echinoderms. Echinodermata is sea urchins and starfish. So what we're going to see with echinoderms, I should actually stop us here a little bit. Do you have any questions about octopus, squid, or cuttlefish? Going once, going twice? Okay, I'll tell you what we're doing. We're making great time, so I'm actually going to show you a cuttlefish video because I was going to cut it out, but we're making great time. So let's watch a cuttlefish video. Those things are super cool, and you'll be able to see them change color and stuff, which I think would be kind of handy. Just got to find our video real quick. Planarian, squid, clam, sponge, cuttlefish. Here we go. That looks pretty good.
The sea holds a predator both well-armed and well-concealed. The cuttlefish. This master of disguise has the ability to project a dazzling array of pulsating colors. But if that weren't enough, the cuttlefish also has an extraordinary ability to transform the shape of its entire body. The titan of the species is the Australian giant cuttlefish. Growing nearly 20 inches long and sometimes weighing more than 10 pounds. With such talent for camouflage, the cuttlefish can creep right up to prey. The cuttlefish prepares its main weapon. Two long tentacles tipped with suction cups that capture prey and deliver it to a beak sharp enough to make mincemeat of crab shell. The tentacles fire in a few hundredths of a second. Truly, sudden death.
Weird. It's so weird. They look like a I don't know, like a strobe light or something, don't they? I thought all those colors, first time I saw that video, I thought all those colors were like the rays of light trickling through the ocean. Didn't realize they were making those colors with their skin. That's crazy. Oh, Sam's got a guest. Hi, Sam's guest. Okay. Anyways, let's talk about echinoderms. Echinoderms are cool. Oh, might have a question. I gotta check this chat box here. Sorry, guys. It's like the bad guys from Penguins of Madagascar. Cuttlefish. Penguins of Madagascar. I don't know that. I'm sorry. I don't know. I thought it was an octopus. They kept messing his name up. I don't know. Anyways, beats me. Whatever it is. Great question, Thomas. I don't know the answer. I'm sorry. I've fallen behind on my Penguins movies, I guess. Anyways, so cool. Let's jump back to echinoderms. Sorry, I was glad we got to see that movie. It was kind of cool. So echinoderms, what we're going to see here basically is our first introduction to radiosymmetry. These are our first examples of radiosymmetry. These critters are going to be a circle. So being circular, they have a top and bottom for sure, but they have no left or right. You can cut them in any way you like, and you're going to get a mirror image on either side as long as you're cutting top to bottom. So there's a whole bunch of different species. Don't memorize that. That doesn't matter. Primarily, we're looking at a radiosymmetry. You could probably argue that that little deal that you step on with all the spines, those sea urchins are probably spherically symmetrical. They're like perfectly circular. They have layers of skin cells covering plates that hold them together. If you've ever picked up a starfish, they're quite hard to the touch. They're not all like slimy or soft like a fish might be. They have hard bony plates, which is kind of cool. And they have a very cool system called a water vascular system. That is what, I don't know if I should say, maybe I shouldn't say that. That is one of the main things that separates echinoderm from everybody else, is a water vascular system. And it's unlike anything we've seen so far looking at flatworms and earthworms and, clams and oysters. Water vascular system is cool. It is a really cool design. So we'll talk about that, and I'll get you a pretty cool diagram for water vascular system. But let's look at some echinoderms because they are super neat. Starfish. Okay, so we'll start with starfish. They're the most common because of their shape. They're not a fish. That's a misnomer. They should be called sea stars, not starfish. A lot of people do call them sea stars, but the name starfish is common enough that we can sure work with it. So 5 or more arms. Most oftentimes it's 5 arms, but there are species that have additional arms. They're going to maintain their shape and their support with these little tiny plates joined by connective tissue. So these itty bitty teeny tiny plates make up this guy's whole body, and they're basically all linked together and make him very strong. So that would be comparable to an exoskeleton as opposed to an endoskeleton. And so far, what we've looked at have been soft-bodied critters that haven't had much of a skeleton. So that's a new thing as well. The plates have spines. The spines make the starfish feel rough. There aren't a ton of animals that eat starfish, and that's one of the ecological issues, is that starfish eat clams and oysters, and they eat a lot. And there aren't a lot of predators of starfish. So when there's not a lot of predator starfish around, starfish populations can get a little bit on the explosive side. They just get huge, those populations. So this is kind of cool. So we have 5 minutes. I think we talk about water vascular system in 5 minutes. Water vascular system is one of the coolest things a starfish has, in my humble opinion. It is like creating a negative pressure by pumping water and creating suction that way. And I think the best, way I could describe it to you is, those little plastic syringe medicine dropper style things where you can like measure out ibuprofen for like a toddler. You can pull out like 3 mils or 5 mils or whatever, a little plastic syringe, no needle on the end, plastic. Okay. If you fill that thing halfway with water, halfway with air, right? Ballpark with me. Okay. Pull that syringe plunger just out a little bit and cover the end with your thumb and keep pulling. It will suck the skin from your thumb up into that plastic because it creates so much suction, vacating that water out of that space. And then when you were to like let go of the little, plastic syringe, you'd have a red circle on your thumb where that skin was being just pulled really, really hard up into that little suction cup deal. So that's the idea of creating a vacuum essentially with this pressure from moving water. And starfish are able to do this with their water vascular system, and it runs all down a starfish. And so basically there's little canals that are going to run from his tube feet into his body and out his back. And so this is what you and I see on a starfish. We see these spines, and that's about it. And we see these spines, and that's about it. But underneath his arm, if you turned him upside down, you would see little bitty suction cups that were stuck in this guy's arm, real short ones. When he's in the ocean, he can extend these suction cups way out. And this is how he's going to win this fight with the clam, because the clam muscles are very strong to keep that shell closed. But the starfish is going to win because he's not using muscles. He's using water pressure. And water pressure will beat muscles every day of the week. So he grabs the clam shell with his little tube feet in his arms. He pumps water out of his back and creates a negative suction against those tubes. And he keeps pumping water, and he keeps pumping water, and the suction gets tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter. Eventually, the clam's muscles are going to get a little bit tired, and he's going to be able to pull, and he'll pull that clam apart with his water vascular system, which is cool because he's got a water pump, which is creating suction instead of muscles to try to tear open a clam, which is like, it's crazy that works, but it totally does. So we are just about out of time. So I want to kind of stop us there with the water vascular system and ask you guys if you have any questions before we call it. If you have any questions about plan for the week, starfish, cuttlefish, anything.
So you said on Wednesday we're going to be doing Zoom.
We are, yeah, Zoom meeting Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
Okay.
Thursday is review day, no Zoom. Friday is test day. I will open the test for a period of days. Like